Right, you're ready.
Say so long, they haven't been changed since 1980. It was on the NPR. I think that's why it's-
Well, welcome to the College of Complexes. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. You can hear me all right? That's good.
You didn't take the money yet.
I'll get it in a minute. Anyway, this was established in February 2009, excuse me. We've had speakers every week ever since. We're on meeting number 385 today, so. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. Our speaker has to be for or against something, we don't care what it is. We have to know ahead of time what we're going to talk about. We give an hour to make a presentation. If anybody interrupts the speaker while he's making his presentation, remind the interrupter that we listen only one fool at a time, it's one of our rules. Then we have questions and answers from the audience, not speeches. And then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in this audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium to respond to the speaker said for or against. Our speaker gets the last word, gets a comment, and closes the meeting. That's how it works. But before we introduce our speaker, we have time for announcements. Anybody have any announcements they want to make? Now's the time.
Okay.
Come on up here.
Well, don't make her get up.
No, she said she would.
I can say it here.
All
I
right.
can just stand here and say it. Well, just a minute, my foot's caught on my purse. Don't push me, you already shoved me once. Don't appreciate it at all. I just wanted to tell you Elizabeth Sands died. I think it was late Monday night, we're not sure. And her funeral was today.
Oh, okay.
If you remember Elizabeth.
She's in New York.
Well,
Any other announcements?
I'm sorry.
Any other announcements? No, I guess that's it. Jim, you got any announcements?
not tonight.
Okay, well, next week, Jim Love is our speaker. He's going to talk about decline. It's on the itinerary here. I'm not going to read all this, put you to sleep. And the following week, October 28th, it's on the importance of Head Start of Greater Dallas. Every child deserves a Head Start. That'll be interesting. And on November 4th, we have Will There Be a Global Economic Collapse? That's George Bluiett, author of Mysteries of Scriptures Revealed. He's going to be here. It should be, that's on your itinerary also. November 11th, it's on the website. It's not on the sheet because we didn't want to print a third sheet, just put a little something on it. Anyway, you can look it up on the website. But our speaker tonight is Calvin Bluiett. He's sitting right here. He's going to talk about how the neglect of America's middle class leads to the death of America's representative democracy. He's an adjunct government professor at Cedar Valley College. He'll discuss what causes economic neglect of our middle class and how both political parties have played a role in this dilemma. He contends that the rise of death of working class Americans shows that business and employees and employment opportunities are concentrated as never before in some metropolises. Calvin further contends that economics in every place else in America have all but hollowed out. And in counties with a population between 100,000 to 500,000, people are losing economic opportunities. He argues that voters in these areas are voting Republican as they have bought the Kool-Aid of themes and marketing based on flawed information provided by Republicans that sounds good but is not workable. Contrarily, Calvin argues that Democratic policy initiatives have the appearance of focusing on the middle class, yet are poor in theme development, marketing plans, and finding a meaningful nexus to real challenges facing all Americans. He will also identify the consequences of this growing dire situation and recommend some solutions to address and reverse an ongoing crisis. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to Calvin Bluiett.
Bring it on, Joe.
I forgot to do the collecting.
Oh, I'll have to get out some money.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
I
Welcome.
was determined to be on time since the last time I hear the person that was supposed to present didn't show up, and we had to come up with something else, and it got pretty funny near the end. So I hope I won't generate that kind of thing. I've studied some people who, outstanding educators, political scientists, and economists, and all other high-level people, and I looked at their writings, and they never have more than 3 or 4 good ideas in their life. And they write books expanding on those ideas, and some of them write 20 and 30 books. And I suppose people are at my level are somewhat caught up in that too. I've dealt with most of the things that I had a real great interest in, and now when I find myself kind of going back and refocusing it on some of the current issues that we're facing today. I'm not going to rehash what Tone has read, but I'm going to focus on 3 points, 3 broad points. And one is what caused the decline of the American middle class. And second is why the decline in middle class will lead to the death of American representative democracy. And thirdly, how can we alleviate this dire dilemma? And so I'm going to focus on the first one. I have a number of sub-points under what caused it, and these are all dealing with different things that is leading to the decline of the middle class. The middle class was once the majority group in the United States, but in 2015 it began to decline, and it's still declining. And so the question is why? So one issue is the structure of outsourcing and factory relocation to foreign nations, along with no reciprocal benefits to America's workers, is one of the causes leading to the death of the middle class. The middle class was really formed in the United States in manufacturing industry that was heavily unionized. They paid good salaries, and they taught them a skill in that particular industry. And with outsourcing and these factories relocated, the training they have is of no value because there's no opportunity to use it. And so that's hurting the middle class a great deal, causing decline.
Yeah.
The second point is weakened organized labor unions, which really is leading to wage neglect. Unions are very small now. They don't have the potency that they had some time ago. And and we have, the last years, like in Wisconsin, they have passed a law that prohibits collective bargaining for public employees. And that's where the growth of labor unions would be in public employees and also service-related employees. And with the changes in right to work laws, they have grown since that time, and that makes it difficult to organize. And then some are contending that it's not right for the company to collect the dues on behalf of the unions, and that hurts a great deal. So the union is caught in a hard place. It can't grow, and its base has disappeared, and so that's a real problem. I think it will affect it. Because I don't contend that everything labor unions have done has been good. There's been some corruption, not among the workers, but among the leadership. And they have had some issues in that particular area. The third point is the decay of American infrastructure is another area where the federal government should be invested as opposed to reprivatization. If you look at the elements of the proposed, what they've been discussing as an infrastructure bill by the administration, it's a reprivatized process. And it's going to be like toll roads. If you live in North Dallas, you know how that is. If you go out North Toll Road, the Galleria, it looks like every 5 minutes you're paying toll again. And the problem, I guess, with the highway system both the federal highway system and the state highway system is the trust funds is not adequate to maintain the highways. So they got to have something. Governor Perry wanted to build a toll road from the border through the state, but the farmers raised so much king and the legislature didn't support it, so it died. So we got to have a way to pay for it, and I don't think toll road would do it because poor people have to travel, and they aren't earning that much money. So how do they gonna get there? So those are some of the problems we need to look at. But it's more than that. Dams are in trouble in many areas and cities throughout the nation. It's really the infrastructure is falling apart. The fourth point, we don't really have an industrial economic plan with a focus on banking, finance, and planning. And these tools need to be in place to help us refocus, because really our national economy is this careless structure, doesn't serve the nation well in doing globalization. We have to have a plan so that we can be competitive with other nations. And the multinational corporations don't own any loyalty to anyone, any state, any nation. They are for themselves. And most of what happens, the multinational corporations earn a large amount of money right now. But it's not consistent with what's in our national interest. It's in their interest, and that needs to change. The fifth one is the lack of recognition of the importance of small communities. Studies found that the counties in which Hillary Clinton didn't carry share of the vote declined most from President Obama in 2012 were those state rural communities. It also found that economic metric that most set apart those counties from their urban counterparts was employment and educational opportunities. The rate of the lower in the rural areas than the major cities. Let me say it clearly. The rate of decline of employment and educational opportunities has declined much more rapidly in rural communities than in urban communities and suburban communities, because we want to hang on to the small school districts which don't have the resources, and that creates a problem also. The sixth one is a poor education system that do not teach students to think, analyze, and make objective decisions. And all corporations are telling educators right now, you graduate, you can't think, they can't write, they can't analyze. And that's what you got to do in today's world. So we need to fix that too. The seventh point is we have undemocratic political system relative to money and politics. We beat that one to death. Stemming from the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And as stated, money is protected by the First Amendment. Voter depression, we have a lot of that going on. We should be trying to encourage people to vote, but we try to discourage certain segments of our population to vote, such as the voter ID law. We have voting machines that don't have a paper trail. So we can't, and with the experience we had in Russia in 2016, we need to have that, and we need to have voting machines that leave a paper trail so we can really know what happened, and we don't. And the last point in that area is partisan redistricting. And that has created a situation where in the last 50 years that, through this process, the party decides who their voters are, not the voters deciding who their leaders are. And so we need to do something about that also. The eighth one is an unfair tax system which creates opportunities for the rich at the expense of the middle class. You just look at the proposed tax cut that we are facing right now, who benefits and who loses. And it is structured that way, and both parties are deeply implicated in that. The last one is the failure of capitalism in America. Record of fairness for all Americans, stemming from the current outcomes of the middle class constitutional structure, which is not working for 90% of Americans. So those are the causes that the middle class is declining. And if the middle class decline, we're going to have serious problems with our representative government, because we can look at the 2016 election going to other elections too. We seem to vote more on emotions than we do on what's real. We need to do better than that, and so that's what is concerning me. Now, the second big point that I have is why the decline in middle class will lead to the death of American representative democracy. If we lose, there's a problem, a culture war that's going on between the upper middle class and lower middle class and working families. There's really a big divide within the middle class, and it's primarily among white Americans. And we need to move with that. The episode in the culture wars, indeed, history has long been a source of conflict in America. Then and now, we see a microcosm which is the struggle to find meanings of America, marked by pierced polarization and over different visions of what America is, what it has been, and what it's become. Mostly taking place within the white middle class. Mainly the aspiring lower middle class and the comfortable upper middle class. The cleavage between higher educated professionals and the less educated non-professionals, lower middle class and working class, has widened in recent years, producing new tensions over land, the cultural divisions of yesteryears, as strikingly as differences of current situation. The culture war of the last several decades were fought over, historically, sexual issues, religious issues, race issues, and family values issues. Today, culture wars often set a new set of battles linked to with shifting economic circumstances, including globalization, immigration, and changing boundaries of legitimate pluralism. The professional class has fared well since the recovery of 2008 and 9 from the economic recession. The lower middle class has lost ground. Wages are stagnating for middle and lower wage workers. Union movements is declining and income inequality is on the rise. The culture studies show that 8 out of 10 Americans with less than a college degree believe that political correctness is a serious problem in America. We have had people talking about here about the political correctness. I think my take on that is a little different from some people. Political correction, you can really, if you are all religious people, you could take it back to the Bible. The Bible says you shouldn't say anything that would cause your neighbor to sin. And what the people don't like politically correct, they want to say what they want to say about someone, whether it's right or wrong. And I don't think that's a good thing, but that's a problem. And the difference between the ones that don't have a college degree or an associate degree and those that have a degree and advanced degrees, they see it, differently. And that's what this is putting. Compared to 5 out of 10 college graduates, 7 of 10 less educated believe that the most educated and successful people in America are more interested in serving themselves than serving the common good, compared to 4 out of 10 higher educated Americans. The lower middle class have confronted the sting and humiliation of social deplorability long before Senator Clinton, Secretary Clinton uttered this word in the last election. Legitimation is another feature of the new culture war, as growing majorities of America believe that their government cannot be trusted, they're incompetent and self-interested, and as citizens, they have little power to influence large institutions. As a result, the credibility of the political establishment, conservative and liberal, has been depleted. It has contributed to the intensification of the legitimation crisis. The resultant political discourse has been less about persuasion and compromise than about demonizing the opposition. The candidacy of President Trump are not an aberration, but estrangement of our times and genuine democratic freedom. has become an opportunity for carefully staged political theater, the end of which is the denial of democratic freedoms. And that's stemming from the decline of the middle class. The second point in that is the type of constitutional structure. We have what is called a middle class constitutional structure, but there's another one called the working class constitutional structure. And the working class is somewhat more like dictatorial nation, a fascism now. But the middle class is one which fits our Constitution, which says everybody should be treated the same. And but that's not what happened. That's not what's happening right now. Class, and especially strong, we need a strong middle class. Our representative democracy is designed to channel differences cross-class interests, not welfare between classes. The U.S. Congress and congressional membership, they have no wealth or property qualifications. But you know, if you go get elected, you got to have money. You look at the pictures they talked about, Mr. Weinstein and his affiliation with President Obama and the Clintons, and look what he's involved in, what's happening to him. So we don't have this requirement in Constitution, but in practice we do, and it should. History of American democracy is advocating a class of America and the special freedom that it provides. At the same time, American Constitution was ratified. The nation was neither rich nor extremely poor. You know, if you had some land, we had what we call the land grant program, you know, 150 or 60 acres of land, and develop it in 10 years, it's yours. We don't have that land to give away anymore, so now you've got to have something else. But it was, you know, they were able to, you know, land. My parents believed in owning land, and many of them had what's called land poor. You had land, but you couldn't pay the taxes. You didn't have liquidity. But that's an important thing. And the American Constitution was ratified. The nation was neither rich nor poor. Since property ownership was important, there is an ongoing debate relative to if property and wealth is the same thing. Some authors say it is, but it's the control and perception is that they are different. The progressive struggle of the 19th and 20th century worked to reconcile industrial and democracy, leading to the income tax, antitrust laws, and the enforcement, creation of a welfare state through the demise of the proceeding. However, now those things are slipping. We have a generation in which we have reduced taxes a great deal. We've stopped investing in public infrastructure. We've stopped enforcing antitrust laws. We have lost the policies of saving the middle class. Inequality in a stable democratic democracy don't mix with particular unequal societies. With a constitution built for equality, with a country based on equality. Unless something happens to change quickly, we may experience a revolution. More likely, either the republic will be transformed into an oligarchy, or people will be seduced by an authoritarian demagogue. We are grossly unequal in cash, healthcare, schooling, and access to air, water, and power. Since President Ronald Reagan became president, income of the wealthiest 1% in America has doubled. The other factor is gerrymandering. About 30 years ago, maybe not 30, 20 years ago, the Supreme Court had two cases. One was when you go through redistricting, there, you cannot discriminate against African Americans or minority groups. And one of the decisions of the Supreme Court was that Congressman A.B. Johnson's district was gerrymandered based on race. And when you look at the way the maps were drawn, it was. And in Representative Sheila Lee in Houston was the same way. So they had to go back and redraw those district lines. They had a similar case, a case in North Carolina, but it wasn't based on race, but on political parties. The Supreme Court said it's okay to gerrymander based on political parties, but not based on race. And so that's some of the problem we have now with gerrymandering, because the Supreme Court has blessed it, and they probably going to have to reverse themselves on that, because they've been moving a little bit in that direction, particularly in 2016. Gerrymandering is an old phenomenon with new dimensions and heightened significance for American democracy. Thanks to technology and polarization, the effect of partisan gerrymandering since 2012 has been more pronounced than at any point in the previous 50 years. As a consequence, tens of millions of American voters have had no meaningful say in who represents them. The United States Supreme Court is currently hearing a case to ascertain if partisan gerrymandering in Wisconsin is constitutional. A key question for the court is whether neutral statistical tools can reliably detect partisan gerrymandering. There are tools in the statistical area available, and it's time for the court to apply them. The tools used in partisan gerrymandering are: one is motive, why they do it, and it's for partisan polarization. The second one is means, and this is voters clustered in restructuring technology. And the last one is opportunity, the rise of a single party control. About 36 of the states are controlled by Republicans. And it's done primarily through partisan gerrymandering. And if they draw a district, perhaps 60% Republican, and if the other 40% are Democrats, they don't have no say who's going to elect unless they want to vote Republican. And it was that way in Texas for 100 years. If you were a Republican, it was 100 years before a Republican was elected, from 1876 to 1978, when William Clements won the governorship. And I don't think that was good for Texas, but it seemed that the conservative Democrats, which is the dominant party in Texas, numbers, they're all Republicans, and they carried their philosophy into the Republican Party. The Republican Party actually worked with minorities and getting single districts in a lot of areas, but no more. So partisan gerrymandering is not good, because it doesn't manifest a true representative democracy. Because you're denying people don't vote. More people will vote if it's competitive. If you know who's going to win before, why vote? You're wasting your time, and that's what most people are saying. The fifth and last statement on this part of my presentations is corporate capitalism, which has looted American democracy. Tom has said time and time again that we have the best Congress that money can buy. And that's true at state level and sometimes at city council level. They go where the money is. It's easy, and I think with Mr. Weinstein and Ms. Clinton, former President Obama, they were going where the money is. He made huge political contributions, and you have more Republicans doing that than Democrats. And so they don't ask anything about the character, just want to know what to check the balance. And so it's easy to work with people that give a lot of money and work with a whole group of people, but that's counterproductive to our representative democracy. Economic studies manifest that the faceless economic forces flatten labor wages and generate the awesome gap between the rich and the middle class and working people. Political actors and political interests were the wheels and steering at every turn, starting with President Reagan's reactionary tax cut. Some of you are old enough to remember in 1981, we got a tax cut twice. And for me and where I was paid every 2 weeks, so I got $10 more every 2 weeks, and that's by the time my twins were born. That wasn't enough to buy the formula. So I got that twice. And that's when the deficit began to accelerate, because when President Reagan was elected president, the United States owed $1 trillion. And by the time he left, we owed about $6 trillion. And so you can't cut tax and increase spending. And this is the problem we have right now with the tax cut. How are we going to finance it? And if we're not careful, it's going to accelerate the growth in the deficit. And I don't know if we can stand too much more with 19 trillion debt, because probably the third largest expenditure is interest on national debt. And so that's what we're working with. and anti-government slogans. In the early 1980s, both political parties were involved in this plan, thus they were controlled by Wall Street, big banks, multinational corporations, with no one looking out for the middle class. It's getting smaller and smaller. Now, the last part of my presentation is how can we alleviate this derelict dilemma? And I kind of phrased it with a colon. We need to recognize that the structure of the work environment has changed in America. Therefore, we must move to ensure that all Americans have the skills necessary for the changing work environment. Further, we need to enact legislation requiring multinational corporations to pursue objectives that are consistent with our national interests and not just their interests.
Oh, I like this little message.
Consistent with our national interests, as opposed to multi-corporations' interests, which manifest reciprocal benefits between what's in the interest of the multinational corporation and what's in the interest of the nation. If you look at it and what is practiced right now, what they do doesn't help the nation. It actually hurts the nation, but it helps them tremendously. So it needs to be a better balance. Secondly, we need to enact legislation creating a friendly environment for labor unions to organize, grow, and function. The right to work law needs to be abolished. Union dues checkoff should be legal. Collective bargaining for public employees should be legal also. The preceding action will enable unions to expand to white collar, service, and public employees. That's where the growth is for unions. If they can't go that way, they go down the van. And then if you don't have labor unions, look at the way it was when we didn't have them. And that could very well come back. The federal government need to invest in our declining infrastructure as opposed to reprivatization to prevent the decay of Americans' infrastructure. This will require cooperation with among the federal, state, and local governments because they all got to be involved in it. We all got to pitch in to pay for it. The interstate highway system is one paradigm to be emulated. And before President Eisenhower, we didn't have an interstate highway system. We had an interstate train system, and we spent lots of money giving land and had a lot of corruption. But the interstate highway made it possible for us to go on a pretty good highway all over the nation. And that caused us to travel a great deal more than we used to because you could tell what state you could get in. Sometimes Texas always had a pretty good highway system, better than most other states.
Louisiana's bad.
Terrible. Yeah. But they don't have the money. They have the oil, but they have the money. It's not going where it dams, bridges, is falling apart. And that's going to create some problems if we don't do something. Other part of our instruction needs citizen and government action also. Some people when the federal government look at money as a gift, but investing in our infrastructure, spending money in our infrastructure is an investment. An investment in retraining people who can't afford, grown people, old people, maybe 40, 50 years old, they need to be retrained. They can't pay to go to school and live. They don't have nothing to live on. So they need a stipend. And these trades don't take 4 years. Some of them take a year. Some can do something in 6 months, and others like an associate degree. And we have a junior college network. It's a good place to work it. It wouldn't cost a great deal if we focus it right. And it would be an investment because the people would get off an unemployment compensation and become taxpayers. And that would help us with this huge deficit we have. So that's investment. And we need to understand the difference between investment and giving money away. This is related to the items that I said was what caused them. We need an industrial economic plan with a focus on banking, finance, and planning, and an economic Marshall Plan for the nation of which citizens can buy into. If Democrats I'm not being biased by parties, but the stuff that I was reading, this is what they said. Republicans like to cut taxes and reduce spending. Cut taxes and reduce spending. Primarily, if they give a material tax cut to all American workers, that's a lot of money. They can use huge tax cuts to the rich, and it doesn't cost as much. But who needs the money? Who's going to spend the money? If you get the money to a working person, they're going to spend it. Rich person probably save it. Not, upper middle class. When President Bush gave us those 2 tax cuts during his 8 years, I think one was $300 and the other one was $600. My wife and I both got that because we both were working. But I didn't spend it, and it didn't stimulate the economy. And so if we go to give a tax cut to stimulate the economy, it has to be the people who are going to spend it. And that's what's not happening. Just some elements of the tax cut we have right now. The cut that will be for working people is they'll increase the amount of money for exemption. That's not going to be very material. Now, what they going to do for the rich? All right, a rich person now can if they have $1 million net dollars, they can keep it and not pay taxes right now. But now they're gonna they don't pay taxes regardless of what they want. That's what's in the tax code. And they want to, it's a sleeper in there. In Texas, we wrestle with that because the sales tax is not always, you cannot write it off all the time. And so they want to take it off permanently. And that's pretty mature when you file your income tax. At least mine is. And so, that will be more of a cost to me than the benefits I receive for increasing the amount of the business. Because I don't have a business now with me. So, but I mean, some people that have more, but still, that's the impact. You got to look at what's in those laws and how it's going to affect all of us. In corporations, they want to lower their taxes. Well, they don't pay no taxes hardly anyway. They write off everything. I have a cousin-in-law who was a full bird in Oregon. He got out and created this company, and he had $100 million contracts with the Navy, cost-plus contracts with the Navy. And he let his company own everything. The house he lived in, the car he rode around in. The only thing he paid for was grocery and utilities. And so if he can do that with a moderate-sized company, what do you think a large company can do? So when they talk about reducing, reducing the income tax rate for a company, the court says they're a citizen, so they're a person, they ought to pay like I pay. So it's not that way because I don't have the leverage that they have. So we need an industrial plan that to deal with these issues. And also, I think our national economy has to be revisited because it's operating like it did 50 years ago, and the world has changed. And we got to work in a way that our people can be competitive, and they need the training to do it because multinationals are going to hire the smartest people. And they may, if things continue to trust you, then they be doing most of the time. Democrats need a 50 state economic development strategy. The jobs the jobs that are coming back are not labor intensive. They're robotic and digital. So if you can't program a robot or maintain a robot, the same thing with digital, what you gonna do? Now these jobs does create other jobs in the world, but you still gotta have training to do it. So training is very important. Therefore, workers need training for these new jobs, and the nation should invest in financing job training programs to equip workers for the new jobs. I think that's much more economical than paying unemployment compensation. And because you can't, some studies suggest that the average American is 3 paychecks from poverty. So, and we saw evidence of that in 2008 in the housing market because people had overspent for a home. And if something happened to one member of the team, the wife or the husband, they lose everything. And so we are encouraged to spend. The advertising tells us, you know, you need this, you're gonna feel better. And I've tried some of that, I didn't feel better afterwards. Sometimes I didn't even use it. So I decided to think for myself, so what's gonna make me feel better? And that's what I spend my money for. And my whole priority was educating our children. And so we were able to get all of them graduated, and one went on and got a PhD. But that, I think, was a higher priority than buying a big car. I didn't buy a large car until my children finished college. And then I didn't finance it. I paid for it. I don't have to worry about that. But that's what we need. We need to rethink how our economy functions, and we need to try to teach this to children. Our young people that graduate from high school and college, most of them don't know nothing about economics.
True.
And that shouldn't be. And then most of them take civics, they don't know anything about politics. And so the middle class, for the most part, are college graduates. They have some knowledge. And that's why I'm saying if we lose the middle class, we're going to lose our representative democracy, because it'll be as I indicated before. We should take action to create opportunities in both urban and rural communities to participate in our national economy, ensuring that workers in rural communities have access to training, economic opportunities, as well as urban communities, which will reduce the transportation crisis in urban communities. We are developing some of these smaller communities, maybe 100,000 population. They could create opportunities and they could be successful, but right now these small communities just falling apart. It used to be very vibrant, but nothing. Everything's in the urban community. And look at Dallas Metroplex. We can't get nowhere on the highways, on the highway system. We're doing all we can with DART, but that's still, we're having a hard time training people to use DART. And so those are some of the things we need to be looking at in the education system. Many of the districts, I grew up in the high school that I went to in Jasper County, was the only high school that had a county school district, was where it was beginning, but the others became independent districts, as though they were small towns. And they were small districts. And they have gone through consolidation in some districts in Texas. But we need to do more of it, because these small districts and poor areas don't have the money to hire teachers, get the equipment, and so that when students graduate, they are behind and they get frustrated and drop out of college or don't even try. So we need to, I contend that we need to develop every mind to its fullest potential, because we're in a thinking world, in an analytical world, and it's not going to go back the way it was 40 years ago. And we got to focus on what's going on now and train. Most students don't know, they're still doing what I did. They go into some area, they don't know where they're going to get a job. But these jobs that we understand, I understand here, and I know they bring a lot of people over from Asia to do those jobs. And let's train our own people. We bring people in for nursing. My daughter's a nurse. It's not easy. My older sister was a nurse. It's a hard working job. And if you make an error, your career is gone. And I think working 12 hours is too long. And which I can't get my daughter to do anything different. She likes that time off that she has. So we need to focus both on rural communities, urban communities, and suburban communities, because the whole economy is interrelated. And what hurts one group of people eventually will hurt us all, because it's interrelated. You can't segment the economy. It flows a different way. And so we need to do things to educate and put all of our people in a position to do well. Local, state, and federal government should work together to ensure that all students, this is dealing with education, have access to a quality educational opportunity in both urban and rural communities. The small districts need to be consolidated to ensure that the student body is large enough to support meaningful quality education for their students. We should encourage foreign travel. I think it's, I don't know how you feel about it. Without the Army helped me, they sent me to Germany. And that was my first time outside the United States. It was a real revelation. It broadens your perspective. But some of us in middle class think everybody's like us, and they're not. Many people grow up in a little community, and they don't know how to get out of it. They don't even go to another state. I didn't go to I went to Louisiana because my mother was from Louisiana, coastal Louisiana, her relatives were there, DeRidder, Louisiana, that area. But that wasn't far from where I lived. And in 1954, I went to Mississippi, then in Alabama, because I won a 4-H club, national, I won that through the 4-H club. But when I went to Germany, it was really an eye-opener. And it made me look at things totally different from the way I was. And I think many of the things happen politically in our nation is because too many people are fixed on something that's not real. It sounds good, sounds simple, but there's nothing simple no more. The only thing I think is simple, which we don't do, is to love each other. That's pretty simple, but we don't do that. So I think foreign travel is very important. Kennedy, when he brought in the Peace Corps, that helped a large number of people that worked in the Peace Corps, and they got a better view of what's going on in the world and how we can help. So I'm suggesting that all foreign students have traveled through programs in high school. When you finish high school, some parents, like President Obama's daughter, she finished high school, she's already been admitted to Harvard. So she had a year off. I don't know where she went, but normally he went all over the world by himself. Did you? And did it help you?
That's a big issue, not for here now.
Okay. Okay. I guess it had a different, but I think we ought to have opportunities for high school to go with people in junior and senior college and universities. And Peace Corps is still here, we can expand that. Military, I really think, we need to, everybody ought to be in the military. I think it has some help, and maybe it'll help us have some compassion on one another. And because historically, when we have wars, the rich parents' children don't go to war. And it's particularly true with a volunteer army, because many people volunteer because that's the best life they can have. If you come from a poor environment and you get to be a E5 in the non-commissioned, and you go to see the club they go to, most of us in the middle class don't go to a club like that. And if you go to the officers club, you don't do it unless you're you're going to a private club like they have in there. But that's, and the money they earn and thing is, they can't afford to get out. And many of my classmates who went into advanced ROTC, stayed in and made captain, they couldn't make that kind of money when you're out. So they stay in. It's not because of patriotism, it's the best way they can make a living. And we need to recognize that. So I think if they do that, our attitudes, I hope, will be broad. And at least mine was. And we arranged for my son to go to Russia. He was always talking about Russia. We did it through the church, the Presbyterian church. And my daughter, one of my daughters go down, I'm trying to get the nurse to go somewhere, but probably she will start traveling soon. Okay. The next one is we need to fix the undemocratic political system. I'm going to spend more time on that because I guess I should have been a politician. That's what I studied. My wife wouldn't let me. She wanted to keep her life private. So I didn't do that.
You're too honest.
What's that?
You're too honest.
Well, at home I learned you gotta have tranquility, so you're gonna do more giving than taking. So I did all the giving, and I'm glad I did. Okay, we need to alleviate the undemocratic political policies relative to voting, partisan gerrymandering, and money in politics. Further, we need to change the way elections are financed. Now, Tolman and I disagree on this. And to me, the best solution would be for public financing of the election. You could shorten the time and all that, and then you would have to spend your time raising money and be committed to people. So maybe they would have to represent all of us and not just the few. So I think public financing would really help in that, so that all Americans have a stake in our representative democracy. People like me, I'm not poor, but what I give politics, and they don't care much, they just keep on writing for more. But if you give a huge amount of money, you dictate what you want done. And when they do that, they aren't thinking about the middle class, they're thinking about themselves. And so that's why I think, further, we need a constitutional amendment repealing Citizens United Supreme Court decision. I've read all the Federalist Papers, both for and against the Constitution. And I didn't see anywhere in there that money was protected by the First Amendment. If you buy drugs, is that protected? I think it's just as detrimental to buy the politicians off, where they represent the top 10% and not the bottom 9%. We all need to be represented, because we have a representative democracy. We all ought to feel a stake in it. And I think public finance will do that. We should enact legislation to prevent voter suppression, such as a voter ID law. And I'm gonna give you a real thing. I argued when it passed in Texas that it was something we could overcome. It would take a little work, but we could deal with that. But it was discriminatory, which the courts have said, is if you have a concealed weapon permit, you can vote. You can register to vote. If you're a college and a state university and you have a student ID, you can't. You got to meet the requirements of the voter ID law, and that means the address on your voter registration, on the driver's license, got to be the same. And some old people, they can't get a birth certificate, because my mother had a hard time in getting one, because all the people that knew her could sign an affidavit were dead, and that's kind of hard, and it's unfair. We do need voter machines with a paper trail, so that we can verify that the count was accurate. Now, I have some faith in the ballots because I worked in it at the election offers, and we looked at the things that came in, and we would tell them what was wrong, stuff like that. I'm not sure. The voter machines basically don't have that, and the ones we have are old. They need to be replaced. They're very expensive. They need to be replaced. That's what will have to happen, but we wonder where the money's going to come from. I think the partisan gerrymandering, I don't know what the court's going to do, but I indicated. And the foreign influence in our political system, a good many states were hit based on information I read, but they argued it didn't have any impact. But if you didn't have a way of verifying who voted with the voting machine, you can't really prove that. And some revelations coming out, like they use Twitters and they also Facebook to just put out false information, and people believe. The remedy, the courts reform can take two routes. Federal courts and the district appellate courts could set national standards that place guardrails to limit the most serious extreme offenses. And individual states must adopt new laws to eliminate the ability of legislators of one party to create unfair maps. The Supreme Court has an opportunity to act when it hears, and is hearing right now, Gills versus Whitford concerning the legislative district in Wisconsin. They are more gerrymandered than any other state in the United States. Partisan symmetry is the idea that parties should be treated the same. It should have roughly the same opportunity to translate votes into seats. Partisan gerrymandering is a separating separating politicians from their voters. American democracy relies on the faith of the American people. When legislators choose their voters, and the voters do not choose their legislator, this causes voters' faith to erode. Partisan gerrymandering contributes to why many voters sense that government doesn't represent them. States should enact legislation requiring a nonpartisan commission to redraw districts during redistricting. They're doing it in some states and it's working. You don't have the same problems we have in other states. I think that's one solution we have. We need to eliminate the unfair tax system, which creates opportunities for the rich at the expense of the middle class. We need a tax system that is fair to all classes. Both political parties are guilty of enacting tax legislation which benefit the elite, and this is not fair to the middle class. The burden of taxes is on the middle class and working class, because the rich people are not paying that much in taxes. They can write it off. They're in equities, they're in real estate, they write this stuff off. But because I figured out a way I wouldn't have to pay no taxes if I had 4 rental properties, and I rented them in March, but I recognized being greedy, I was being paid by taxes, so why would I try to afford it? So I dropped it, but many people do that. And I had a friend in West Texas, had a certain breed of livestock, and he would sell, but it's like, it was a unique breed of cattle. And he would sell that, and he could depreciate it. So, but it wasn't cheap, like $10,000 for one. And that he got it done, and he was doing it. And he told me that was the way to do it, but I decided not to do any of those things. Because at some point, if you're a working person, you don't have to pay the taxes, just like IRAs. When you get 72 and a half, you got to start paying. And so if you don't have a corporation where you can just kind of push it through that, well, then it's not working. Okay, the Democrat leaders still want to have it both ways. They are offering solace and useful ideas for helping injured and angry working people. However, internal political influence won't allow them to come clean relative to their own contribution to the pain and suffering of the middle class and working class. They seem to be committed to tax cuts for the elite because they're elite in the corporate community. The tax hustler is a particular ugly example of how corrupt democracy can be diluted by corporate capitalism, more or less, in the broad daylight. Voters favor politicians who they believe. Voters favor increasing taxes on the rich and harbor a profound mistrust of loaded politicians who they believe do not represent their interests. Rather, the interests of the elite. Further, they support government funding of programs like Social Security, the Social Security program, Medicare, Medicaid, and a majority of the Affordable Care Act, in higher education. Nevertheless, Democrats' support for diversity of all groups, including immigrants and culture pluralism, all make them toxic to large segments of the white working class, and this was evidenced in the last election. Democrats must develop compelling programs for all Americans, since our economic system is interrelated. The last part is reform America's system of capitalism so that it works for all of us. Americans should adhere to our middle-class constitutional structure, which currently exists. The United States, and exists in the United States. The constitutional structure depends upon relative equality across classes, and especially a strong middle class. The outcome in practice has caused the decline of the middle class. The current outcome of the middle class constitutional structure are similar to the outcomes of the class welfare constitution. We need to analyze the outcomes of capitalism in America and redesign it so that it works for all Americans, since the historical outcomes of capitalism has focused on what benefits the top 1%. that has not led to, which has led to excessive inequality in America. Economic inequality threatens our representative democracy. Based on the condition upon which our nation was founded, which no longer holds, we can alarm bales and adopt massive structure changes across society, consisting of support of labor unions, break up of monopolies, and repeal the Glass-Steagall. I found something accidentally, and a lot of us in the Bay Prison Bill, it's talking about 12 warning signs of fascism. One is exorbitant nationalism. Just think about this and think about what's going on right now. Exorbitant nationalism. Enemies identified, demonization. Rights disappear. Secrecy demanded. Military glorification. Corruption unchecked. Media control. Rampant sexism. Intellectual bullying. Militarized policemen. Elections stolen. If we don't stop the decline of the middle class, that's what we're going to have. That's it.
Now you can just stand there and answer questions.
Yes.
Turn this thing on.
That was very good.
That was very interesting, Calvin. My first question is, what are the main factors that are standing in the way of having your excellent ideas implemented?
I think, we all have a responsibility, I think, and we all kind of stay too much with our own little group, don't think outside of it, and that, like I was saying, the culture different between the lower middle class and the middle and upper middle class. It's that loneliness that people feel, and nobody's talking to them about real substance. The stuff they get through the media is just polarizing and misleading. We need to have a way to educate people, to analyze issues. And, something that, everybody don't see how to share the same thing. But President Trump, you look at what he had done most of his life, and it's different from what he's advocating that should be done now. But a lot of people believe that, and they have rights to do it because the Democrats didn't talk about the issues that were really bothering people, even though a report came out and said white men between the age of 45 and 55 had a higher mortality rate than any other demographic group. And it's because of what I said in the first thing. They lost their job in the factory. They were trained for that skill. But all those factories were closed uniformly across the United States. So there was nowhere to go. And if they got a job, it was minimum wage, so they lost everything. And we should offer them hope. And I think that what politicians, but it's, I think the church ought to be involved. Not political, but to try to get people to think reasonably. But in most cases, they do the reverse. Some of our largest churches do the reverse. And I think people got to talk to each other. And we got to be compassionate to problems that people are encountering and not be afraid to say if they see it, wrong, to point it out and really describe it. Don't just leave it alone. And because it's interrelated, it's going to hurt all of us, most of us, 90% of us. So we ought to, I think we can work on that. A lot of social groups and things like that, they ought to be trying to work with their people. I work the polls, and many people don't know the difference between a primary and a general election. They come to a primary, they want to vote a straight ticket. And I said, you can't vote a straight ticket in the primary. You got to do that in the general election. So you need to go back and counsel this and go and find out who you want to vote for. Then they want me to tell them who to vote for. I said, that's a felony. I don't want to go to jail. So, that's something fairly simple that everybody knows, but you assume they do, but they don't. A large number that came in. So that's the way I think we begin to get. And we got to learn to respect each other, even though we're different. You know, he and I, we respect each other. We don't think the same way. But there's no reason for me to dislike him or dislike me. So we got to be able to disagree, but not become disagreeable. That's the only thing I can say.
My second question is, Trump was supposed to go to Washington and drain the swamp. Do you think he jumped into it and in fact has polluted the swamp?
Well, I can't argue with that point. We had that debate 2 weeks ago. I don't think President Trump really understood how the government works. Because I read an article, it wasn't a liberal article, that they're doing is just you have people from his associated with him doing the same thing. And so we have a perception from observation is, you know, if I do something wrong, you know, I think it's right for me to do it, but I don't think it's right for you to do it. And I think a lot of that's going on. And the government is tough. And you got 3 separate branches. And it seemed like if you have a majority, almost a winning majority in the House and the Senate, and you have the executive branch, you ought to be able to get something done. It's not happening.
Last question while I hand it around. When the peasant class that voted Trump, when they finally realized they've been totally duped, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, you know, I indicated we don't make, you know, if he doesn't do what he said he was going to do, I fear what will happen. Because I indicated earlier, it may cause a revolution. Because when people totally give up, they become anomic. And we see it like this gentleman went into the airport in North Carolina and with a bag and had a bomb in it. And he dropped it off and left. And then they figured out what happened. But it was a couple of days before the meeting. The day was the first time I heard it on the media. And it happened 3 days ago. But the gentleman that did it was white. And so, I don't know, I'm not saying it was that, it's just, you know, the media, they aren't perfect either. And so, I think if the people don't wake up, it's gonna get worse. We got to learn that we're in this stuff together and figure out what's best for all of us and go that way. Vote that way. Vote people in and think that way. If they don't re-elect. You know what Badham is saying about the people, Mitch McConnell, and you know, he can't get Coker, he's gonna quit anyway. So you know, we have a responsibility. The Constitution right now gives us the leverage. But if we let people polarize us in our little cubby holes, then we're all gonna hurt.
You suggested that one of the ways of restoring the middle class was to basically restore the labor unions. And I was wondering if in Germany they have the idea of worker councils, where it's a less adversarial situation of union versus management. They have representative of management and workers working together in a cooperative way. I was wondering what you thought about that concept.
I think that would work too, because we have examples of that in the United States where we have like stock sharing with employees.
Yeah,
employee owned. Yeah, and they don't have these labor problems, and they do well. But you know, the rich doesn't get as rich that way because they don't share. Germany has a good system, and you know, they don't have the problem we have here. Outsourcing is not a problem there. They work together for their people, and they have I think a better education system.
Yeah.
You take about where we call middle school, when you finish middle school, you need to know what you want to do.
Well, they also have a very strong apprentice program.
Yes, yeah, because you know, everybody don't need to go to college. Most of the jobs that are available, the technical job, don't require a 4-year college degree.
True.
And that's what we need to focus on. We have the junior colleges, let's use them for that purpose. And we can have other structures of it, but right now what we have is labor union, because we have a small movement in that area. And where it is going on, it's working very well. And so those are options also. I was just looking at what we have right now in the United States. But Germany has a good system. And because they make a decision about middle school, you take a test where you go technical or you go academic. You know that. England does that too. And so, but we leave it to the, you know, they aren't thinking about that when they finish middle school year. They just want to go to the 9th grade. But they ought to use electives to strengthen themselves so when they, in particular area they have an interest in. And I think that can be done if we just kind of encourage students a little bit, and parents get involved. Yes.
Calvin, I think I'd just like a little clarification. You start off talking about the failure of capitalism, and then you're talking about trying to get capitalism working. Is that your position?
Well, I don't think capitalism is working for everybody. And I indicated it's working primarily for the rich, not for the 90% of the people. And I think what I indicated was it needs to work reciprocally for the multinational corporation and for everybody else. We all ought to benefit from it, not just one group. And that's my take on it.
So are you saying we should have an envy tax if we envy someone's wealth?
No. I'm not for that. I'm not for that envy of payback. We're in too much of a hole to be dealing with that. We need to be thinking about what we can do that's best for everybody. You know, tax system, I don't see it, from my vantage point, I don't see it as onerous because I pay about 10% of my gross. And I don't think that's much. You know, that's just for federal taxes. But I pay almost as much as sales tax because of, you know, a lot of what I buy is covered. Food is not covered, but I buy other stuff.
Well, I've remarked on this before, and I could blame it all on Jim here, but the wealthy actually can hire CPAs and attorneys to minimize those taxes that you levy upon them, and so I'm really wondering where the gain is there.
But he's got to make a living. He's a CPA.
I'm retired.
Yeah, or you had to make a living.
I had to make a living. I worked for a lot of
You know, if you look at the largest professional group that serve in state legislatures and U.S. Congresses are attorneys. And they write the laws. And they write the laws to benefit who they think their constituents are. And that's where the problem is. And they give us a lot of baloney. We talk a lot about what I call peripheral issues, like, you know, standing up when they sing Star Spangled Banner, all that kind of stuff. And that's symbolism. And I don't want to talk about your president too much, but he was at an event and they had retreats. You know about retreat, don't you? Did you go to Army, Tom? Tom, did you serve in the military?
Yeah.
When they had retreats, you got to stand up straight and wait. Well, he was there and he didn't stand up. But the football players, they can't kneel down. So, I mean, you got to be one way or the other. So the attorneys, the CPAs, that Enron, I think CPAs, they should have put those guys in jail.
Amen.
Because when you said that it's inconsistent with the principles and concepts of accounting, that's supposed to mean something. So if you can't trust the balance sheets or the financial statements of an entity, how can you know how to invest with them or not? And so, you know, but you know that whole accounting firm has disappeared, I think.
Yeah, they went out of business.
Yeah. So a lot of us, we have to have integrity in what we do, in whatever the professional area is. But it's easy. Greed can overcome any of us. I know you're gonna shoot me down. Go ahead.
No, I'm just asking a question.
Okay.
What do you make of the idea of a flat tax?
God.
God?
I mean,
You believe in God?
I tell you, for me, it
No,
sounds okay. Look at flat tax is a regressive tax. It means whatever the rate is, everybody pays.
Why is
It's
that
like a
regressive?
sales tax. The sales tax who did it hurt more?
Lowest income.
That's right. Because it doesn't bother me. In the lowest income, they can't write that off, even if you can. So I don't like the flat tax. I think the best potential is for tax pay where you pay based on your ability to pay. And those people who make less, pay less. And those, but you know, we have all kinds of things because the attorneys write that, and they're looking for a job. And you know, sometimes the attorneys and the accountants, they get together and they kind of work it out because they got to make a living too. But I don't like the flat tax. It's a regressive tax, and it hurts one group more than it does the other.
I remember I get mail from the National Right to Work Association, and in their newsletters they have numerous examples of employees who are literally forced to contribute to unions who give political contributions to candidates that they completely disagree with. And they're not allowed to not contribute. The union...
In right to work states?
Well, not in non-right to work states.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so in other words, if the unions get their way, like you're saying, they force people to contribute to basically either directly or indirectly to candidates that those people disagree with. And it sounds like you're advocating that.
Not really, it probably sounded like me, but I'm thinking about labor unions doing what they were. I pointed out at the beginning that the labor leaders were corrupt. And we have, because even in the right to work states where they had factories in the early days, if you didn't pay, you find yourself dead. But they don't do that no more.
Well, I'm not so sure.
Not in the right to work states.
Star Texas.
Yeah, but there have been historical evidence that they have done that because that's where you got the free rider thing from. Those guys, if they be there in the right to work state, they're gonna benefit just like everybody else, but they're not paying for it. And that don't make the other labor union happy. I look at that kind of like, you know, I pay taxes. And they spend that money sometime where I wouldn't spend it, but I don't worry about it. You got to look at whether the labor union is benefiting them, and that's what you're paying for is the benefit, not the other thing.
Well, if they're not getting any benefit, why should they pay for it?
If they work for a company and you unionize, you are getting benefits. You're getting the benefits.
What benefit does a union give you?
Higher salaries.
Better benefits.
And benefits.
I don't think it's always true, though.
Well, the unions did a good job of kicking salaries up.
Calvin, I've got a question regarding, I guess, basic logic. Please stand behind the mic, by the way, when you get over this side. It's
Okay.
over for as well. Here's a basic logic situation. I support unions. I believe they have a place in things. But I also believe, from everything you were discussing here this evening, that it takes a really wealthy capitalist to be able to afford these guys.
Well, it's got to be an interest in making money.
So, but how can you be, it's kind of like, okay, if you're going to have a union in some area, you need someone who's actually got scratch to go out and found a factory of some sort.
No.
So,
Not true.
now I'm going to get told, okay, well, we can have like, what is this, employee ownership and all this business?
No.
Oh, government. Right, yes.
Businesses are owned by investors, thousands of investors in pension plans.
Okay, investors are capitalists.
They're
That's
not
the very
rich people,
definition.
though. A pension plan is not some rich guy, it's a pension plan. They have the assets of thousands of individuals.
Okay, well, I was actually wanting Calvin's answer on this,
Okay.
and you can, that sounds like useful input, but what you're saying is I could go out and I could found a factory. All I would need to do would be to convince some investment plan that I had a viable operation. But anyway, Calvin, what's your answer on
Venture
that?
capital.
Well, I don't really see it the way you articulated you see it. I'm talking about a labor union that's doing what it's supposed to do. And I think there are tools to require them to do what they're supposed to do. And as long as they do that, I support them. But when they do things illegally, they should be punished, just like when bankers do something illegal, they should be punished.
I think you get to sit down.
I get to sit down?
Yeah. Okay, now it's your turn to talk. So who wants to be first? You get to respond to what the speaker had to say for or against.
Got your book of words back, yes. In case I run off with it and sue you for something or the other.
Okay, well, I thought I would try to answer some of the questions I asked Calvin a little bit. I think most people, thinking people, would say that things are going wrong in America, okay? Just as I would say the same thing about England. And I think it's due to the same cause, that over a period of centuries, you had a ruling hierarchy. And the ruling hierarchy actually took the lion's share because they were the ruling hierarchy, and most people put up with it. They didn't really have much choice. And so you had the Roman Empire, and the Spanish Empire, and the British Empire. And of course, they all collapsed because the ruling hierarchy actually gets corrupt, and actually, it doesn't spend money very wisely. And so that's what's happened basically to America. I mean, basically, it thought it could run around the world and control things, but totally misspent everything. In fact, by the end of the 50s, it was running a deficit. By the end of the 50s, as soon as that, 15 years off, ended the war, you had all the money in the world, you had it was technically got all the technical stuff. A lot came from England, radar, self-sealing tanks, petrol tanks for aircraft and so on. A lot of technology came America's way. And they had all the money, and it was doing very well, but it managed to squander it in 15 years. And got involved in war after war after war. And consequently, for, I think, aggrandizement that these ruling empires go through, they just totally do not invest properly in their own country. And they do not invest properly, and this is what we've seen here. I came here at 68. America was investing in technology. We had great companies, Motorola, IBM, Xerox, right? They were world leaders. But you had a group of people that didn't, well, I'm sorry to say, Jim, you had companies run by bean counters and salespeople. And these people are about the worst type of people you could have running a company. Salesmen, all they can do, copy, like the IBM PC came out and they came back, you must copy it. Well, it's ridiculous. You can't, you'll always be behind if you're trying to copy somebody. You have to come, like Apple did. It actually came up with something that was an advance on anything IBM had. But that mindset is totally unknown to most guys in America. Then, of course, you have the bean counters. And their idea is cut costs. And the best way to cut costs is go have as Jack Welch wanted. He wanted his factories on a barge so he could sail it around the world to the lowest possible workforce. That's what he loved to do. And basically that's what America's done. So it's underinvested in itself, and especially its people. as we said. So yes, now the real fundamental problem is that the Americans in general don't really understand what's happened to the country. I mean, I see it as an outsider. I see it as what's happened to England. But I don't think most people understand what's really happening. They feel it, they don't understand it. Now, what it's going to take, actually, is massive changes in most institutions, because they're just not working. Especially the financial system's not working, the political system's not working, and the Constitution and the Supreme Court is not working. I mean, it's ludicrous that those decisions are, really. And so, now, how you change all this, I do not know. Robert Skidelsky, who's a biographer of Keynes, says there's going to have to be 2 more big crashes before people will wake up. But the question is, if there are 2 more crashes, I don't think America could recover, actually. I think it's that bad. I don't think we'll be able to recover. I think China, who is on the rise, and in fact China are in fact creating new technology, okay? They're creating more scientists, engineers than America. Same with Japan. It's the East that's on the rise, India too. And I don't see America waking up to realize all of this. They're in this dream world, fantasy world. Mostly, really, it's sort of the myths of countries. And America really was based on myth after myth after myth, really. Which Americans couldn't recognize, but in fact, I was going to write a book one day, I will call Precisely Backwards, which means, people believe things at 180 degrees from the reality of things. Such as owning guns makes you more safe, yes. Oh yes, we know that. So what's it going to take, Calvin? I really don't know. It might well take a crash, another 2 more crashes, and the country can't take it.
I don't think it is.
They can't take it. But with this level of debt that's growing, by the way, it's not decreasing any. There's going to be another. It has to. It really has to. So there's no way of avoiding it. The level of debt is accelerating. In fact, accelerating. It's not just linearly growing. Accelerating. And there's an end point to that. If you have a debt that can't be paid, it won't be paid. It's as simple as that. And because actually, I think the fundamental problem is they believe it so suits the ruling elite that the free market will solve all the problems. Well, it really never does. It really never does. You have a lot of government intervention and help is needed, and guidance, with politicians that really know what they're up to. That's the second problem. Do we have politicians who really know what they're up to? And by definition, they almost never do. They're the worst people, really. So again, you have failing institutions, failed politicians. And, so I don't know, Calvin. I'm not that hopeful. I came at a good time. I had good money. I had a good career. I was needed. I earned my crust. But I don't know today. I really don't know. Now take Donald Trump. John said the capitalist has to have money. Yes, Trump did, but most of it he went and borrowed huge sums from the banks. Okay, that's where he got his to build Trump Tower and the casino. And of course he blew it. He went broke after until in the end they wouldn't lend him any more money. There you go, depression. Yeah. I mean, you can always borrow money to start businesses. I mean, it's always there if you have. But the problem, we need to train. My main point always is we need more businesses. Instead of having job centers, we have business creation centers. And instead of paying people to be unemployed, we pay them to start businesses. So every kid, birthright is he goes to school, as we say, he does technical education or wherever it is. He's trained to meld into the local job ecosystem. So he's guaranteed, like the old days, you used the steelworks, so that, you know, you followed your father into the steelworks. Well, we need, you know, in the local area, like mining, okay, you become a coal miner, so on and so forth. But we need that on a sort of a state by state, city by city concept. Because we, you know, in the 90s here, we had in fact, we had the communication boom. I made, you know, I did my career consulting. I made tons of money telling people how to run phone systems. And that was the game plan in Richardson. So we need centers of excellence. We need to have schools that train for that. We need money to fund it. And you know, it has to be a community effort, directed, you know, by people, you know, with some degree of integrity and intelligence. And I think, but you see, that's government interference, you see, which we can't allow because the free market is all going to do it all by itself, and it can't. That's not the way it works. Anyway.
I needed my water more than I needed the microphone. I stood up. Let me talk just for a moment about a subject that we discussed in our meeting tonight in the presentation. We've talked about multiple times. And as most all of you who've been here, who are here tonight, know, as an accountant, as a CPA, I worked with labor a great deal. I did a huge amount of recruiting and interviewed, I don't want to tell you how many thousands of people. So I can't, like I've said before, I can't know everything about it, but I have learned a good bit. I would tell you this: there are 4 primary things that have happened to the middle class that have caused some diminishment. One of them is always referred to first, and that is we've closed factories and we've packed jobs up and moved them out of the country. That's generally true of simple, repetitive jobs that you can take to, you know, first we were taking them to Japan, then to Taiwan, and then to India, and then to China. Finally trusted them enough to take our jobs there. And we could do it cheaper for simple jobs. Now, I've explained this before. If you take we make hardly any shirts here in the US now. But what we will do is we will design the shirt, we will design the pattern, let's say it's Hager. We'll do everything except cut and sew. And the shirt might be worth $80. What we pay China to do the cut and sew might be $15. And we might spend $5 shipping. And the retail store can mark it up 100%. So the difference to you and I as a consumer for a shirt being sewn over there is not as big as it seems like, just in a first thought. You have to put your accountant's brain on and say, well, what makes up the components of that cost or that price of the shirt? But anyway, that has happened. We've shipped jobs across. The other thing people don't talk about very much is that a lot of people have retired. And the people who've retired have generally been between the ages of 55 and 70. They've been making max of their career salaries. They've been replaced by people at much lower levels. If you can, on an ideal basis, you put them in at the bottom of the stack and you push everybody up toward the top. So the person who's in the second tier moves up to the first. The person who's in the third tier as a supervisor moves up to be a manager. The person who's a senior staffer moves up to be a supervisor for the first time. Anyway, that's been going on. Guess what that does? It lowers average middle wage salaries, because a group of those people are gone to the farm or to the lake house or whatever, and they have been replaced numerically, but not salary-wise, by cheaper, younger, lower-waged persons. Retired, jobs sent abroad. Okay. Two other things of significance have happened to the middle class. Of those who you could still say are in it, are immediately above it, immediately below it, like in the top of the lower middle class or in the bottom of the upper middle class, because you break it down into 5 groups. Lower, second group, middle, upper, and then top. Well, because of the technological increases in our business community, in other words, things that we work with are more complicated. Lance, who comes and speaks to us at least once a year, describes, perfect example of it, worked at LTV for a zillion years after being a PhD school teacher. Unusual, PhD school teacher. Now you're running a lathe. And I always laughed at that. I just thought, gee whiz, why in the world did you do that, Gene? Anyway, Gene described how they had, when he went to work there, I'm gonna make up the numbers, but they're approximate. They had 17 lathes in that group. They had a person standing there running every one of them. As they advanced the technology on the lathes could do more by pre-programming, not by somebody doing one little task, changing the dials, resetting the lathe, starting it back up again, doing something else. Anyway, doing that 4 or 5 times to get it finished. It was more programmed, so instead of having 17 people there doing that task, it got down to about 6 or 7. So it reduced wages to the company by reducing the number of people it required to do the job. But those were more significant jobs and they paid higher. So what we have had happen is people who lost a lot of those middle wage jobs, almost 2/3 of them moved up, and about 1/3 of them moved down. Those were the blue collar factory workers like Jim, what's his face from Rowlett, who worked at US Steel or one of the other steel companies for years. A lot of them high school level, graduates or not, no college, and they were unionized, and they made salaries that were 20% higher than those jobs were technically worth. Guess what? They shut it all down and they moved most of it abroad. It comes from Japan, China, Italy. The steel on the Margaret McDermott Bridge downtown with the big arches, Italy. So we've done things that have caused our middle income wage group to change. 4 main ones. Shipped some jobs over, retired some expensive people, pulling the average down. We moved some people up the ladder, and we moved some people down the ladder. And I hope that makes some sense. Is it all good? Maybe not, but it's not all bad. In other words, nobody came in and grabbed all of those jobs you don't see in the middle class and rubbed them out and put people out on the street. Thank you.
How many here remember Alvin and Heidi Toffler? Anyone? John?
Yeah, he wrote
Future shock.
Future Shock, yeah.
Future Shock and Power Shift. I would like to deliver the Tofflers a $10 trillion bill. They are one of the primary ones who sold us on this thing that Ross Perot called the Great Sucking Sound. That we could be the information economy, and we could have all the dirty work done by somebody cheaper around the world. And it wouldn't hurt a bit. It hurts. As I've said before, I think the last reporting numbers in 1998, when NAFTA and GATT actually kicked in, I think we had $493 billion in money coming in from ex-posts and tariffs and things of that nature. Not all tariffs got eliminated, but most. During that same year, we had total cash coming in on income tax to the U.S. Treasury, I assume that's where it was going, was $510 billion. So my idea at the time, I never was really sold on this power shift thing, but I'm like, okay, if you could do that, if you could just basically, blow out the tariffs, and all the politicians were saying, it's no problem, we'll cover it, we'll get it covered, that $493 billion would be missing. Well, why not just eliminate the individual income tax? I mean, if we're throwing that type of money around, why don't you give the people a break? But instead, we gave the corporations a break, and we let them go shopping for slave labor in other countries. And somehow or other, it's never really worked out that we've been able to compete against slave labor. That same nominal $500 billion has been lost every year. And there have been some measures to try to pay things down and recoup it. But see, what I'm talking about is, during Bill Clinton's reign of power here, I could criticize the Clintons on many things, but he was at least kind of keeping the budget. I don't think he was reducing the deficit that much. I mean, he's credited with at least keeping the budget. But then after NAFTA and GATT, nobody really has, for various reasons. So we've been sold a load of bull. And one of the things that is a characteristic of the American people, and probably mostly all people in the world, maybe there are a few exceptions, but Americans really can't think deeply about finance.
No.
They're really not good into abstract thinking on that. What is the usefulness of a Federal Reserve Bank that charges us for providing us our own currency? On the theory that they're going to control the ups and downs, and like within a decade and a half after their inception, we have the Great Depression. Great job, guys. Great job. Almost looks like you did it. But anyway, this is this whole discussion when we start knocking capitalism around. I keep reminding that capitalism is a term really popularized in its current definition by Karl Marx.
Yeah.
And I don't see how you can get from free market economics to creating this class division, class warfare thing called capitalism and socialism, how you can get out of that paradigm. Einstein said that no problem is ever solved in the same mindset that created it. And I personally think we ought to kick Karl Marx to the curb and get some better definitions here.
And the framers.
And one of the things I think we really need to do in our Christianity, John, is I think we need to eliminate this envy crab bucket. And this is like if someone starts getting a certain degree of wealth, everyone else is conspiring at how to grab a hold of them and pull them back down into the crab bucket. And then at the same time, we're talking about growing the middle class. You know, I'm not really as negative towards runaway capitalism, if you will, where somebody just kind of goes totally off the charts. The strange thing is, mostly people end up worshiping these people like a Bill Gates or who was the other guy over with Apple? Steve Jobs. And I mean, you know, people are looking at them.
Dell.
Yeah, and so, yeah, Michael Dell. They're looking at them and being very worshipful, and then we turn around and we talk about, you know, basically putting the screws to those capitalists. So we only really have a short time here for a rebuttal. I would say the major thing that we are missing here in this country is something that we had early on. And what we're calling capitalism, free market economics, has had about a 400-year run. It's created unbelievable wealth. Everybody and their cousins have been trying to find a way to tap off that wealth from the people creating it and take a free ride. And that has been what government has done. Government is excellent at this. I really have a problem with government being the solution. But then we're back to the whole issue. I think what Calvin brought up here is some people trust government, some people don't. During Trump's short run with incredible impediments, we are now being told we have some of them are his own. I'm not saying the guy is perfect, my God. But we went from 0% growth under Obama, we're up, you know, somebody was complaining, we've only got 2% growth. Well, some people are saying 3% growth. It very well could be false. It could just be hubris out there in the market, people thinking maybe there's an opportunity to go for the gate and get through it before something really bad happens.
Being reported though.
But whatever, the reports are coming out. You know, you say they're false. I don't know. Seems a little bit better than under Obama. At least there's hope.
Stock market's going crazy. Here's hope.
Spare change.
Yeah, so I'm, of course, out of time. So.
Make your speech. Everyone's invited within 5 minutes.
See, there might be something better now.
No, this is okay. This is a free country. And this is the way it is. There you have your standard new county. This is the new Democratic Republic. They don't like free speech. This is why I came up to speak. I came to see you today expecting I wouldn't agree with everything. I agree in a base level that trumps a lot of this stuff. And morality is going to be, if we're not honest, it don't matter what system you do. Why did I come up though? Just now, this 5 minutes. I came to see you because this is free speech, and you know we can talk. And your angle is pretty much a classical liberal angle, where we want to make this country better. You're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Why I'm up here now is the Democratic Party seems to be strongly influenced, probably controlled by younger people that do want to destroy this system. They're called the neo-Marxists. I'm going to bring up this thing called postmodernism, where it was proposed by it was actually created the last century in the 1970s by French philosophers, but now it's taken over academia. And one of the tenets of postmodernism is power is everything, truth doesn't matter, and a debate and logic is not just not such an ineffective tool. It's not an ineffective tool. It's more. Logic is an evil. Logic is an evil tool of the white patriarchy. This is the postmodernism, and it's going to come as a bit of a shock, but it's taken over academia, and it's seeping into the media, which is so strong. Now, the Constitution has never provided for media this strong, this hypnotic, this high tech. It's a wonder what it can do, but there's no morals behind it. There's no morality behind this very powerful media. So all I can say is, all you good liberals, beware the Democratic Party. I've said this a million times. Same thing with the Republican Party and so forth. Right now, because the young people in the colleges have gone crazy and professors are extremely liberal, you have to know what's going on there. It's not the same liberals as Tom Berry and Calvin, and a lot of us grew up with. I guess I was, even when I was young. I was kind of unconscious. I didn't really try to be a politician, but it's different now. The communists have taken over. They're on their way to taking them. So the good news is you don't have to worry about the revolution. It's already started. So I'm trying to bring some good news. You were so down, John. You're like, oh man, this looks bad. This looks bad. This looks bad. Well, you're right. It looks bad in the perspective of what we've been sold. We've been sold an idea of what right and wrong is, and the government is supposed to follow this. It hasn't been a left or right thing. As far as the politicians go, there are differences in approach that could be worked out if we dealt in good faith. And I just see this thing where free speech is being demonized as predominantly being pushed by the left at the moment. And all I can say is be careful, throwing your hat in the ring with what do they call it? I marked the whole ticket down. I just love the Democrats. The Republicans have been sold as they hate everybody, and they're so selfish. They're just thinking about themselves. I don't know. That's a good propaganda line, but when you look at empirically, I guess my favorite YouTube personality is Thomas Sowell. Everybody familiar with him?
Yeah, I know him.
You know?
I know him.
Yeah, you know. Well, I think he's pretty smart. He's pretty good, and at least worth consideration. His ideas. So basically, he says, "I'm an empiricist. What's worked? Where is things the worst? Is it Detroit, New York, L.A.? Basically, Democratic strongholds, Democratic mayors, black city councils, Democratic beyond Democratic, just activist. Let's say to the corrupt side of the Democratic Party. These places have been in control for decades and decades. In fact, my hometown, Philadelphia, was the first black mayor. Nothing against him, nothing against the people trying something, but that's not your cure. The fact is, the Democrats, forget about the race thing, because I think the black people have been a little bit suckered into this. They are the worst hellholes, and they keep asking for more, and say, let's have more of the same, more of the same. Now, let's go to communism and socialism. You got Pol Pot, Castro, Stalin, Mao. I don't know, let's put Hitler in the group too, why not? This is not really a great track record. And everything's so upside down now, we gotta be careful. The people who call themselves anti-fascists, just because they call them anti-fascist, doesn't hide the fact, to me anyway, that everything they do is the most fascist thing that could possibly be done. They try to intimidate with force. So if we want to live in a country of fear, I think that's the question. It's not Democrat or Republican. The question is, do we want to work things out in good faith, in peace, or are we going to resort to violence where whoever's got the most guns or whoever's the scariest or whoever acts the most crazy and kamikaze is the boss? That's what we're up against. And as you look at the news, and don't just look at NBC, look at some of this stuff on YouTube, see who's doing the threatening, who's doing the shutdown of free speech, And, you know, just watch out. Democrats are co-opting people's goodwill. So that's why I say I agree with almost everything you said in a certain sense, but I think today's Democrats aren't filling that bill at all. In fact, I think it's a dangerous path. Thank you.
I think that's, you're going back again?
Yes,
Wow.
I am.
Okay.
Not unusual for others, but rare for me.
That's okay.
Let's talk about the word that's been bastardized and made to sound evil, corrupt, rotten, dishonest, stand on the negative adjectives. Capitalism. What is capitalism? Well, if you have business, take our calendar back here in the United States, 200 years, 1817. The businesses were basically, mostly, by numerically, were mostly small sole proprietorships. A high percentage of the people still lived in rural areas. And if they lived in a town, community of any sort, most of them lived in a small community, under 1,000. Most of the businesses were solely owned. Remember watching Little House on the Prairie? You know, one family owned the grocery, not the grocery store, the general store. And they sold groceries. They were more like an Albertsons is now, where you can go in there and buy anything except a new car, you know. The grocery store has evolved into being the supermarket, which has now become like the old little general store in a community of 300 people that then serviced maybe 1,000 people who lived around it in the rural areas. So as we moved into the cities, the opportunity and need for a business to be bigger was created when that happened. Guess what? It cost money to do that. So the person who could afford to open the general store on the Little House on the Prairie could not afford to build a factory in Toledo that was going to employ 250 workers and have more equipment in it than their net worth was by 25 times, let's just say, for a number. They didn't have the money to do that. Guess how that came about? Capitalism. What is capitalism? Well, capitalism is when multiple people come put their money in the bucket to invest in that company, to form it, and allow it to operate. We have a few companies here in Dallas, not in Dallas, excuse me, in the United States, which are still owned by their founding families. Mars Candy, which makes a big percentage of candy bars we find on the counters, and the Koch brothers up in, is it Kansas, who own all kinds of different companies. And there were 4 brothers. The father started it, created it, passed it down to the sons. 2 of the sons who wanted to be aggressive in growing it, typically. They bought the other 2 sons out. One of them lives in Florida and the other one I don't remember where. And they have some business, but they're much, much, much smaller. You don't ever hear about them in the news. But the Koch brothers own huge businesses. And those are 2 large, rare, privately owned companies that have managed to accumulate their money, not pay it out to themselves, not distribute it in dividends because they don't have shareholders. They've kept it in the companies and managed to grow them. Most of the time you can't do that. I cannot afford to go out and start up a $3 billion company. So I have to become a capitalist to do that. I have to go around to each one of you and say, hey, would you each put $50,000 in here to start it up? All my family, all my friends, and we end up with 250 shareholders. That's a capitalized company. What that means is A lot of those people will never walk inside the door of the company. They may never work there. They may never have anything to do with it. A handful will, who started it. But most of them have invested in the companies. The majority of it now, when you go get that section of the paper that has all the stock plans listed in there, my Lord have mercy, how could anybody create that many? Well, they all get the money that we can set a little bit aside for and put it into that account, and then they go take our little bit of money and spread it out among 40 companies, let's say, that are capitalized and have stock, and they buy a big chunk of that stock, and then they split it up between all of us who put our money into their account. And that's how capitalism is working in the United States. Unfortunately, politically, because of the words of the politicians, and they feel like they must blame somebody for whatever they think is wrong, they badmouth capitalism. That is an absolute crock of you-know-what. That's the best thing that's ever happened to our economy. Thank you very much, capitalists.
Wow.
From Rockefeller on down. And Carnegie and everybody else.
Well, that's definitely taking a position.
Definitely.
If we didn't have controversy in this group, I don't know what we'd do.
Some facts and some viewpoints.
Ayn Rand wrote a book, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. I don't imagine there would be some in this room who'd wish to suffer through it, but it's actually quite educational and informing. A major symptom of a man's or a culture's intellectual and moral disintegration is the shrinking of vision and goals to the concrete bound range of the immediate moment. This means the progressive disappearance of abstractions from a man's mental processes or from a society's concern. What we have lost in this country is we've lost frontier. We had a frontier for a while there during the whole .com thing and some of the innovations that we've had. We've had a little, bump and a burst here or there, but I don't think we have any real vision of a new frontier, and we really do need a new frontier. That is what is missing, I believe, because it is in the endeavor to deal with that frontier and to reach out into it that society and culture advances. And you can go around the world and you can really see that America today is the backwaters. I'm not just talking about Dubai, but you go to Taiwan or some of these places, the architecture is phenomenal. Singapore. You've got just huge investment development in these places that we're not seeing here. So I think we have to admit that we're kind of the afterthought in this whole thing right now. And I don't think we need to be. But we're talking about issues here, trying to correct things without looking at the bigger picture. I feel that is the bigger picture. Thank you.
I think the last one standing, but you want to say another word?
Yeah.
Come on up here.
Yeah.
I'll just, I think capitalism, is okay, but every now and again it goes completely off the rails. Now, when Jim was right, back in the 19th century, people needed to, mostly merchants, they wanted to build factories so they could manufacture stuff and ship them overseas and so on and so forth. So yes, groups of people got together, put money in. But, well, let's take America. The corporations as such were incorporated by the states. Now, what the states recognized was the danger of this money being accumulated in this entity could be used to usurp and corrupt democracy. And there were stringent state laws against that. You couldn't do certain things. Now, gradually, in fact, the federal government, through the federal government, actually then made it possible for corporations to incorporate into the states, mostly like Delaware, where there were very lax restrictions on corporate money and corporate power. And so basically, the thing that people feared about capitalism, the power of money to corrupt. And I think, to paraphrase Lord Acton, money corrupts and large money corrupts absolutely. And that's the problem with it. Now, the other thing that's happened with capitalism is that the requirement of people who put money in was liquidity. They really didn't want to have much to do with the company, but they wanted to get the money out. Okay, so they really didn't, they were speculators, not really owners. And so what happened is that, so you had stock markets, whereby you could get your money out. Well, what's happened now with high frequency trading, people get the money out every 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing there's no such thing as responsible ownership. And so where the responsible ownership used to be, there was a group of owners, they nominated a board of directors who hired and moderated what the CEO and the officers did. So there was a chain of command, the owners, the board, and the CEO. That's reversed. Because the owners, who the hell know the owners is, right? Every 10 seconds? So in fact, what's happened, the CEO actually runs the place. He acts as if he owned it. He acts as if he's the great inventor of it. And that's the reverse. Many of these people walked in from Harvard or someplace, and really oftentimes knows nothing about the business. But they absorb money out of it. And of course, now, the reason they go offshore is because you have sort of reverse capitalism. And this is why they like the strong dollar, because the money stays offshore. When you build in China, okay, it comes to this country, but the money that gets paid for it stays offshore. And of course, melts into tax havens. So you really don't have capitalism as it was, it should be, where you have responsible capitalism that cares about the country. It's gone off the track. The other thing to say about capitalism is this, and Jim's an accountant, knows this. You have the so-called balance sheet and the income statement. Now, and that is other books of describing how the company runs. And that's what you parade around Wall Street and to pump up the earnings and so on. Well, apart from the fact that you can do such jiggery pokery, you can make black look white and green and purple and anything else, by jigging around depreciations and expenditure. It's amazing what you can do. But apart from the fact that you can falsify almost anything, there's a curious thing. You open up a balance sheet, and on one side you see the assets, on the other side you see the liabilities. Now, the assets are things like cash, receivables, okay, tables and chairs and so on. Now, that's all what you might call capital assets. Now, what's missing in this equation is the most important thing, and that's people.
Yeah.
Now, I proposed once, Jim, a completely different accounting system, which went like this: that everybody in the company must contribute somehow to the bottom line. And I had a method of working out. What did the CEO contribute to the bottom line? What did the janitor? I mean, you know, why do you have a janitor? He must somehow contribute to the bottom line. What's he worth? Okay, is he important? And I think sometimes the janitor and the cleaning staff are more important than the CEO. Because when you go into a company that looks spick and span, and my God, that's worth something. Now a CEO who screws up and steals from the company is worthless, right? It's a negative effect. You know, so you know, look, I think, look, I would reform capitalism because of these defects, really. And I think they are defects, okay? I do think you must work out, and I do believe in employee ownership, but you must work out what value a person is to the bottom line. And I had a whole method. I presented it to Oracle once, back in the 90s, and of course, they were totally uninterested. They were under some other scheme, which, by the way, never did work. Okay? but you know, if you want to reward people, you know, you must reward them, I think, by making them part of the ownership. Okay, you must incentivize them by working out what's your contribution to the bottom line. What, you know, have I thought of something? Have I improved something? You know, because these ideas often comes from, you know, strange ways. You know, was it the manufacturing? Was it the product product marketing people who come up with an idea? You know, where was the value here? What affected it? And you must have a feedback loop. So you see, you actually work out what's working, and it feeds back into reward. So that was a whole way of running a company on completely different lines, by a feedback loop based on contribution of individuals to the bottom line. And that is really a way of people, managing people and recognizing where the capital. Now, let's talk about Bill Gates and so on. Bill Gates never invented anything in his life. Jobs did. He walked into Xerox and saw it and walked off with it. So many of these people get idolized, actually, and never done anything worthwhile, which is why I say, you know, give fair dues. You know, let's reward people for contributing properly. And I think that's what we want. Okay? So, candidly, that's why, so I have severe problems with the way capitalism works. I don't think it works well anymore. The fact that money, they go offshore and the money stays offshore. It doesn't come back, it's not properly invested in America.
Because of the government.
Well, the government can help. The government can help. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth on to the floor.
I think I am now the last one standing. Anyway, I want to thank our speaker. I think he did a terrific job. He got us all thinking anyway, that's for sure. There's a couple things I wanted to mention. It was brought up earlier about unions. I wanted to comment on that because I was a chairman for a union for 20 years. And the point that was raised here was, do unions make political contributions out of dues money? And they don't. The dues money is not used for political contributions. I'm telling you that.
I think that can be refuted.
No, you try to refute it because I was a chairman for a labor union. I can tell you.
Your labor union may not have done it.
They're doing it today.
Let me explain this. I'm not going to get an argument with you, but the point is that they had a separate account for if you wanted to donate, if you wanted to. I was the Transportation Political Education League. That's what they call it, TPEL. And if you wanted to donate for contribution for candidates and so on, you put it in that pile. But other than that, dues money was not used for elections or any support of any candidate. Period. Just so you know. And that was a federal law, by the way, and they had to comply with that. And all the unions in the country had to comply with that.
No, they
So, well, they do. There's a federal law that,
don't. Written up in all the newspapers that they do it.
well,
Common knowledge.
follow the law too.
anyway, that's the law.
They break it.
I know what the law is. Now, relative to, I think it was George Meany who, years ago, he was president of AFL-CIO, and he decided not to get out of the International Labor Organization, which was unions in other countries. And subsequent to that, he wanted to just have unions in this country. And subsequent to that, then when corporations went overseas where labor costs were cheaper, there were no unions. And they got super cheap. And China is one example. Apple, for example, produces everything in China. They don't produce anything here. They don't have any jobs here. In fact, the everything is over there, and the money spent on inventions, things for the future, that's over there too. So all your research and development is over there. It's not here, and that's part of the problem. And today in America, you brought up democracy. We have a capitalism. I'm a non-ismist. There's no truism. There's no truism in this world. It doesn't exist. There's only degrees of ism. Remember that. And we have a mixed economy, so that we don't have one ism or another. And we try to balance things out. But unfortunately, we're very unbalanced in this country. We're $19 trillion in debt. This has been brought up. Anything that Congress attempts to do to make things better for people costs money. And right away, the other side of Congress says we can't spend the money. So you're into this loggerhead. Automation takes its toll on humanity. It's been going on since the beginning of time. I can remember in the railroad industry, around the turn of the century, you may have heard about the Haymarket riots in Chicago. That was over unemployment due to automation. And it was also over an 8-hour workday, because people were working 20 hours a day then. And they wanted to reduce the workday. And they want 8 hours for work, 8 hours for play, 8 hours for sleep. That's what their argument was at the time. And they argued this, and that was what the Haymarket riots were all about. And we didn't have an 8-hour day in the railroad industry until 1916 when they passed the Adamson Law. And then established an 8-hour day, 8 within 9 actually, because they got an hour off for lunch without pay, and they got single time for overtime. But it was the first overtime that was ever in this country, period. And that passed, and in 1938, after WPA and all the other projects ran out of steam, and the government spending the money, and the economy was still in trouble, then they shortened the workday. The smartest thing they ever did. That was the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. They reduced the work week from 60 hours to 40 hours, the workday from 10 hours to 8 hours. They did not cut the pay. They got the same take-home pay in 8 hours they used to make in 10 hours.
They'd be loafing it.
And it was a federal law, not a state law. It only applied to interstate commerce. So big business screamed like stuck pigs, but they had options. They could break up, demerge, form smaller companies, get around the restrictive labor law, or spend money, become more productive, and produce more in less time than competition small business did in more time. Well, they spent the money. They became more productive. They produced more in less time. Within 5 years, big business and labor went hand to hand to each state legislature to put the small business people in a shorter workday because miserable company want to eliminate their competition. That's how we got the 8-hour day and the 5-day work week. That's how the rest of the world followed. So, what am I bringing this up for? There's a reason. Corporations or automation has taken its toll. Machines replace people. Machines don't pay taxes. Corporations leave town, they come back, they got less people working for them because they replace people with machines. We've got 25 million people in this country either unemployed or underemployed. And that's a real problem. You were raising questions about right to work states and not right to work states. In my view, they should all be, none of them should be right to work states because they need to have, you'd have a level playing field. Because you don't have a level playing field the way it is.
I think it'll be the other way.
Well, one of the reasons Texas did well is because it's a right to work state. And a lot of people left Chicago, other areas, I'm one of them, they came here because labor costs are cheaper. That's not why I came, but I retired, but that's neither here nor there. But the point I'm getting at is this is part of your problem. So what can we do to address this situation? In my view, that we need to put tariffs on corporations overseas so they so they will produce here instead of producing over there. So at least they'll produce here what is sold here. And that way, if they had to pay the difference in labor costs, the difference in environmental protection, the difference in transportation costs, they might elect not to pay those costs and produce things here. Then you'd have jobs here. Then you might be able to shorten your workday. But of course, we got the best Congress money can buy. I brought that up before. And Congress is owned by the corporations. They dictate, they spend the money, and no congressman is going to vote against corporations because as soon as they do, they're out of office. And they're not going to do that. So we've got to get Congress to represent the people before we get anything done. And we got the best Congress money can buy. It's a sad situation. So how can we do? What will they vote for? For the people. In my view, they'll vote for free airtime the last 90 days of a general election. And we can get them to do that because there's no history of a challenger beating an incumbent. It hasn't happened. And it won't happen because all the money goes to the incumbents. So if you did that, then a challenger would get free airtime along with the other person. The media wouldn't like it, but they can always raise the cost of advertising during those interim periods. Then you'd have more people. Anyway, you'd end up with more people working. You'd end up with congressmen representing the people who do the electing instead of representing the people buying their vote in Washington. Then you can put tariffs on corporations overseas. You get jobs back here. Then you might think about shortening the workday and put 25 million people back to work.
They don't want to work.
And it won't work. It will work. It worked before. It can work again.
They don't want to work.
What do you mean? Oh, well, that's a good point you brought up. They don't want to work. My mother used to say in the Depression that you could buy a lot for $1, but nobody had $1. Everybody was out of work, so nobody cared. So my point is, once you establish a work ethic and you put people back to work, then it's a minority, a very small minority that are not working, and they're the ones that will go to work then. The idea of not working will not be a great vote in society anymore. Anyway, I better shut up on my head. So thank you. Our speaker gets to close his remarks. He gets to comment and a comment and close his meeting.
I will file a complaint. Debated me out of time, so I
You have all the time you want.
we got to be out of here at 9, don't we?
No.
But I don't. My remarks were made to stimulate debate. I never argued that capitalism should be abolished. It needs to be fixed, and it does need to be fixed. But it needs to be fixed so it works for everybody, not just for some people. And that was the key point I made. I know Tom doesn't agree with public financing of the election, but that would. Actually, you'd be surprised. The state of Arizona had such a plan. And they financed state elections. And had many more people running for office, and some of the new people were winning. But the Supreme Court struck that all down. And I think those are some of the things that I would do. There's a role for the government. The government has got to set a framework and see what we all play for. That's the only reason we have government, because if we didn't have government, we'd have chaos. And nobody could do anything. So there's a role for government, not because I spent 29 years and 3 months there, but there's a role for government. And the government has done some things that help a lot of people. But again, when we just forget about what's going on and don't understand a lot what's going on. And another things I believe you were talking about, I haven't taken any accounting in 20 years, about 20 years. But they were talking about, rather than cost, value.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where they are on that now, but in my work I had to understand financial statements, so I took all the courses in accounting to sit for the CPA, but I didn't want to be a CPA. But that's a critical thing. If you do it on value, that means you put value on it. And I've argued that too. If the janitor didn't do a good job, we couldn't stay in the building.
Sure.
And that's worth something. If people didn't pick up our garbage, we couldn't stay in our homes. But we don't want to pay them anything. The unions change some of that. But they need to be regulated too. They shouldn't become greedy and corrupt. And it was my understanding about labor unions on political contribution that they would have to ask their members to give something in addition to the dues. The dues were not spent for that. Because I had, you know, that when I make up, they were paying the leave, people that work for salaries, they don't have that much money left from the dues, I don't think. So I don't have anything else to say. I accomplished my goal. I got a lot of pushback. So I'm happy to be
Well, that's it for tonight. They're gonna kick us out of here around 10 o'clock. And our speaker is here, you can talk to him, and we'll see you all next week.
Yeah. It shows the mindset.